My name is Ariana, 32 years old, living alone in Houston, and I'm a financial risk analyst for major corporations. My mother's 70th birthday party was supposed to be a warm family gathering. But everything went silent after one sentence from my sister. A desk job like yours and you claim you paid off mom's house? Laughter erupted from our relatives. No one stood up for me. I simply got up, pulled out my phone and said, "Check your account." Or, "That credit card you've been using to pay the housekeeper." The room went dead quiet. Have you ever been made a joke by your own family, even though you've been carrying the weight of everything for years? If you've ever been belittled just because you chose to stay silent, leave a comment below. Hit like if you've ever kept quiet just to keep the peace. And don't forget to subscribe, because what happened after that moment changed everything. I grew up in the northern suburbs of Seattle, where the winters were long and the foggy streets were so still you could hear the leaves fall. My family wasn't poor, but we weren't well off either. My father, a traffic officer, had to retire early after a spinal injury on duty. My mother was an elementary school teacher who brought home stacks of papers to grade and cooked simple dinners. My older sister, Madison, 3 years ahead of me, was always the center of attention. Even as a child, she was called the sunshine of the family. Me, I was just Ariana. Quiet, well-behaved, never a bother. In the family photos lining the staircase, Madison always stood front and center. White dress, radiant smile, a crown of paper flowers from her school performances. I was usually off to the side wearing my mom's old hand-me-downs looking into the camera, but no one really saw me. I wasn't jealous. Back then I believed I just had to try harder. I didn't need to stand out, just be useful. When I was 15, my parents fell into financial trouble due to my dad's hospital bills. The old pickup truck was repossessed and the utility bills started piling up. I secretly got a job at a small bakery near the gas station, waking up at 5 a.m. to stack trays, wipe ovens and still make it to school. Every night, I'd hide a few spare dollars in the kitchen drawer so my mom would think it came from somewhere Dad had found. "Your sister's studying for the SATs. Don't make noise at night," my mom would say when she saw me reaching for the dishes. I nodded and didn't complain. Madison was chauffeured to dance lessons and private test prep classes every afternoon. The hoodie she wore bore the logo of a well-known California art school, where she said she'd study to become a talented film director. Once I asked, "If I go to college out of state, could you help me with part of the costs?" Mom looked at me, smiled gently but couldn't hide her surprise. "You're thinking of leaving too? I thought you'd stay in Washington. It'd be easier for everyone. We've got a lot to handle at home." I smiled, nodded, and applied to the local community college instead. While Madison was out at prom or some event with friends, I stayed home counting every dollar in savings. I didn't blame anyone. I chose this path. But I had hoped for just one thank you. Later, when Madison didn't get into her dream college and enrolled at a private school nearby, Mom maxed out credit cards and Dad called old friends to borrow money. I handed over my first-year tuition, the money I'd saved for over 2 years, and gave it to Mom. "I'll defer enrollment for a few months. I'm sure the school will understand." Mom hugged me quickly and turned away. Dad said nothing. Madison never knew. She just told her friends, "My family took care of everything, it's no big deal." I kept working. Day shifts at a cafe, night shifts doing data entry for a small company. I learned how to budget, manage personal finances, and track every expense. While friends bought lipstick or books, I bought instant noodles and outdated accounting software for my secondhand laptop. Once I asked Madison if she wanted to study with me. She laughed. "You're trying to teach me? I'm not good with numbers." I smiled, but something sank inside me. Not because of her words, but the look in her eyes, like I was a kind helper but never meant to be on stage. When I was 21, Madison got engaged to Zach, the heir to a family cosmetics store. The wedding took place in our backyard, twinkling with hundreds of string lights. I helped Mom draft the guest list, check the catering, book the van, and even paid the final deposit for the band because Mom's credit limit wasn't enough. "You're really good at this, Ariana," my sister said, slinging an arm over my shoulder as the photographer got ready. "If I ever launch my own brand, you'll definitely be my accountant." I smiled. No one knew I had just canceled my first ever trip to New York, a finance conference I'd dreamed of attending, just to chip in for this wedding. The following year, when Madison had her first child, Mom called while I was finishing a report for a startup in California. Ariana, the baby's out of diapers. Madison's exhausted. Can you help her out a bit? I wired money right away. Then again the next month. And the month after. No one asked me to carry the burden. But I did. Because I believed, if I could help, I should. But over time I realized they didn't just want help. They expected it. It was my duty. My obligation. It was taken for granted. And my presence? I remained the quiet, easygoing, reliable little sister. I slowly realized the price of not being a bother was being forgotten. And the cost of being selfless was a lifetime of invisibility. That nickname, the quiet girl of the family, wasn't praise. It was the cage that held me back piece by piece. I still remember the afternoon I received the admission letter from the University of Chicago. It was printed on thick paper, embossed in the corner, beginning with a formal greeting. "We are pleased to welcome you, Ariana Morgan." I held the letter at the window of my small apartment, heart pounding. After 3 relentless years of working and studying, this was my shot. A master's in financial management from one of the top schools in the country, with a near full scholarship. I imagined myself leaving Seattle, living in a small apartment near campus, walking past old brick buildings, hearing professors talk about breakthrough investment strategies. I wanted to text my mom immediately. But when I returned to the living room, she was coughing violently on the couch, her face pale, a prescription bottle tipped over on the table. Her wrist was wrapped in gauze after multiple IVs. And in the kitchen, the phone was on speaker, Madison's voice echoing, "Can you help me cover a few thousand? I lost the job at Zach's and my credit card just got locked." I slipped the letter into a drawer and brought Mom a warm glass of water. "What did the doctor say today, Mom?" He tried to smile. "They're changing the meds. The new ones cost a bit more." I nodded and said nothing. After she fell asleep, I sat down, opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. $8,432. That was everything I had saved to start a new life in Chicago. Security deposit, textbooks, health insurance, all carefully calculated. I slid the cursor to open another tab and logged into Madison's bank account. I had helped her before. Previous transfers were $500, $1,200, $300. But she owed over $7,000, including late fees. I clicked transfer, entered the familiar routing number. My finger hovered over confirm. Then I closed my eyes and hit send. The next morning, I called the school and asked to defer enrollment for 1 year, citing a family emergency. The student services representative spoke gently. "We understand. Wishing you and your family the best." I thanked her briefly and hung up, then sat in silence for a long time. Dad called that evening. "How's your mom?" "She's still weak, but the new meds seem to be helping." "And school?" "I postponed for a year." He let out a long sigh, then whispered, "Everyone in this family is depending on you." I smiled even though he couldn't see it. It was the kind of sentence that warmed me and broke me at the same time. I wondered, if I wasn't here, would they figure things out? Or had they grown too used to me always being the one to clean up after them? A few days later, Madison called back. Her voice was cheerful. "I just saw the money hit my account. You really saved me. I don't even know how to thank you." I replied softly, "As long as you're okay." She chuckled gently, "You know, I'm lucky to have you. Anyone else would have just walked away." I didn't respond. Because deep down I knew that if I didn't send the money, I'd feel terrible. But even after I did, it didn't make me feel any more loved. In the weeks that followed, I worked overtime on freelance financial consulting projects. I helped a small coffee shop chain in Colorado restructure their budget after COVID and also signed a short-term contract with a newly launched tech startup in Portland. I worked from morning until almost midnight, brewing coffee with an old filter pot, eating instant porridge for dinner. Every time I heard my mother coughing from the bedroom, I reminded myself, this is the right thing to do. But somewhere deep inside, I knew I was drifting further from the future I once dreamed of. I had imagined launching my own financial analytics firm by the age of 30, helping women entrepreneurs get started, being invited to speak at major conferences, becoming a role model for girls who had once been underestimated. Yet here I was, delaying that dream to continue a cycle of emergency help for loved ones who had never once asked if I was okay. Once I said to my mother, "I think if you get better, You should consider hiring a daytime caregiver. I'm worried my work is getting too affected. She looked at me, her eyes sad. Are you saying I'm a burden? I paused. No. I just want you to have more professional care. She stayed quiet. But those words kept me up for many nights. I didn't have the courage to say the truth, that I was exhausted. Not just physically but mentally. I was draining myself to fill in the gaps left by others. When the 4th month passed, I received an email from the university. Your scholarship will expire at the end of this academic year. If you don't enroll by August, your benefits will no longer be valid. I printed the letter and placed it on my desk. For days I didn't touch it. Each time I saw it, my chest tightened. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I had grown too used to keeping everything to myself. Like a habit, or a trap, I could no longer tell the difference. I was sitting in my home office, the desk lamp casting light on rows of glowing numbers on my screen. The small clock on the shelf ticked past 12 a.m. and I still hadn't left my chair. A client's financial report from Denver remained unfinished, but my eyes were starting to blur from fatigue. Just as I was about to shut down my laptop, the phone rang. Madison's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it for a moment, heart heavy. Any call from her at this hour was never good news. I picked up, trying to steady my voice. Ariana, she started, sounding a bit rushed. I need your help with something. I leaned back in my chair, eyes half closed. What is it? I need some additional investment for my online cosmetics brand. We're about to launch a new collection and need to order inventory urgently. Just around $70,000. Can you help me? I'll pay it back soon. I stayed silent. The night breeze drifted in through the window, carrying the scent of wet grass after the evening rain. I opened my eyes and stared into the dark behind my screen. What about the $50,000 from last time? I asked, not harshly, just a question that needed answering. Madison laughed, a light sound as if I'd said something silly. Oh, come on, you're still hung up on that? Ariana, you live alone, no husband, no kids, you don't spend much. If you're not using that money, what's it for? I froze. In that moment, every keystroke, every sleepless night, every dollar I counted to pay for Mom's health insurance, my niece's tuition, all of it came rushing back, tangled in that offhand comment. I don't need money because I live alone? I repeated slowly. That's not what I meant, she quickly backpedaled. I just meant, you're doing well, you're stable. And I'm trying to keep this brand alive. It's for the family, right? I heard every word clearly. For the family. As if everything I'd ever done, sending money without questions, covering bills without asking, was simply expected. I think you should find other funding sources, I said, my voice low and firm. On the other end, she hesitated. Ariana, don't do this. I really need it. I used to need things too, Madison. I needed 1 year to go to school at the right time. I needed someone to check on me when Mom was in the hospital, when I turned down my scholarship to stay. Where were you? The silence on the line stretched out, broken only by the ticking of the clock in my room. I could hear her uneven breathing. I thought you didn't need those things, she whispered almost to herself. You were always okay. I shook my head gently. You never asked if I was really okay. Madison's voice returned, now tinged with frustration. So you're really saying no? You're going to let my shop fail? I said I'd pay you back. I didn't want to get angry, but a familiar ache flared inside me. It wasn't about the money. It was the entitlement. The assumption that I was the one meant to carry it all without being seen as a person with limits. I'm not trying to let it fail. But if it only survives by draining me every time you need help, maybe it should fail. She scoffed. So now you're the cold one, huh? I pressed my lips together, steadying myself. It's not coldness, Madison. It's learning how to say no when I'm being taken advantage of. There was a light thud, like she tapped her fingers against a table. I'll remember this. Don't blame me if people find out who you really are. I didn't respond. She hung up. The phone screen dimmed and I saw my own blurred reflection in the glass. I sat there for a long time, not returning to the report, not getting up. All my feelings felt pressed into a tight knot in my chest. I didn't regret the money. I mourned the trust one once had. I mourned the days when I thought trying a little harder might make me loved the way she was. I got up, walked to the sink and splashed cold water on my forehead. The wind outside picked up, rattling the window slightly. I looked out at the streetlights in the distance and thought to myself, I won't go back to that cycle again. No matter what I have to face. After that midnight call with Madison, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, mind spinning between anger and emptiness. Her words, "You don't need money," echoed like a scratch, deepening with every thought. The next morning, I brewed a stronger cup of coffee than usual, opened my laptop, and I decided to review every single one of my financial transactions. Not out of suspicion, but because I was beginning to realize just how much I may have overlooked. I pulled up my bank statements, scrolling back month by month, year by year. Familiar transfers repeated themselves regularly. There were transactions I didn't even recall agreeing to. Accounts receiving money under company names or unknown individuals, but with addresses I recognized all too well. I opened each file, cross-checked every line. The first one that made me freeze was a recurring monthly payment labeled Evergreen Mortgage. I dug up an old contract and connected to the payment portal. The legal owner of that mortgage was Madison Perry. The address was the house Mom was living in. The house I had believed was under my parents' names. I had always thought I was just helping with a portion of the cost during tough times, never realizing I had been covering nearly all the monthly mortgage payments for 4 straight years. The total came to nearly $160,000. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding in my chest. Had I really paid off the mortgage on a house under my sister's name, in silence? I kept digging through the list of large payments. One entry made my stomach turn cold. Nearly $3,000 every quarter, labeled Comprehensive Auto Protection, BMW. I entered the contract number into the tracking system. The vehicle owner was listed as Clara Morgan. My mother. The very same BMW she'd been driving for the past 2 years. I still remembered her saying, "It's just something your father's friend let us borrow. Rides smooth." I didn't ask questions. I simply nodded and quietly paid the insurance when I saw the bill come through my personal email. The credit card used to pay for that insurance was in my name. Not hers. Not anyone else's. And no one ever said a word about it. I suddenly felt like I couldn't breathe. As if the home I'd lived in for years had been an illusion. Nothing but a constructed model of deceit, built on my silence and their calculations. But I didn't stop. I kept scrolling through the property tax payments I'd made over the years. One from 5 years ago came up. Over $12,000, paid urgently to stop the foreclosure of our old family vacation cabin in Oregon. At the time, Dad had called and said, "The old place is being hit with back taxes. We're getting old, we can't cover it in time. Can you help your dad out?" I remembered clearly how quickly I transferred the money that same afternoon, thinking I was saving a piece of our family's memories. But now I knew the truth. That cabin had been transferred to Madison's name the year before I made that payment. I found a copy of the new ownership certificate, filed at the Yamhill County Clerk's office. My father's signature was on it. I dropped my head to the table, pressing both hands to my temples. What I felt wasn't just anger. It was betrayal. Everything I had once trusted, family, loyalty, gratitude, suddenly felt cruelly artificial. I had spent my entire life believing I was helping my family stay afloat. But the truth was, I had been used as a financial tool. A walking bank account. A quiet, obedient woman they could manipulate. They hugged each other while I kept the family afloat with silent wire transfers. I opened another folder. One I had used to archive years of financial emails and contracts. There was an email from Madison on Christmas Eve 3 years ago. "Sis, if you don't help me, I'll lose the store. All I need is for you to co-sign. I'll pay you back over time." I had done it. I had done everything. And she had the nerve to say I didn't need money. That since I lived alone, I had nothing else to do with it. I turned on the printer. Every document I could find, I printed. Bills, emails, contracts, transaction summaries. I organized them into a thick black folder. Each sheet of paper was proof of a piece of my life I had silently sacrificed. No one had forced me to do it. But no one had ever stopped to ask if I still could. When the printer finally stopped, I looked at the growing folder, feeling hollow and exhausted. In that moment, I understood one thing with perfect clarity. This was no longer about money. It was about trust. About a person's value being overlooked. About sacrifices treated as obligations. And I couldn't stay silent anymore. I sat in my small room, the glow of the computer screen reflecting off a face that showed no expression. The thick file I had printed the night before still sat on the desk beside me, pages speaking for me finally after a decade of silence. I didn't need validation anymore. I didn't need apologies that came too late. I just needed to reclaim control of the life they thought they could command. I started with the first step, logging into my bank account where I had once added Madison as a secondary user 5 years ago. Back then she had said, "It'll be easier to pay tuition when I can't get to it fast enough." I hadn't questioned her. But now, my hand was steady as I moved the cursor to revoke access. The confirmation box popped up. I clicked OK. Next, the credit card. I had requested an extra card for her 3 years ago, labeled emergency support. But there was nothing urgent about luxury mall purchases or weekly beauty product hauls worth hundreds. I called the bank, my tone calm. "I need to cancel the secondary card." Immediately. The rep verified a few details, then the transaction history popped up. As I read through each line of spending, I no longer felt angry. Just sad. Sad for myself, for letting it get this far. Finally, I opened an email from the private elementary school where Madison's son was enrolled. I was the one who had signed the tuition sponsorship this year, with a quarterly payment agreement. The next payment was due at the start of the next month. I wrote to the principal attaching a copy of the contract. I politely explained that due to changes in circumstance, I would no longer be able to fulfill the financial guarantee. I asked the school to contact the child's legal guardians directly moving forward. I didn't want the child to suffer, but I couldn't keep standing behind decisions that weren't mine to make. It took almost 2 hours to finish everything. Not a single moment of hesitation. I wasn't acting out of anger. I was acting because I needed to live my life. Before logging out, I opened my inbox and started a new email. The recipients were clearly listed. Madison, Dad, Mom. I typed slowly, deliberately. I will no longer be the invisible one in this family. What I once did quietly, you treated as obligation. Starting today, try living on your own terms. I will no longer pay for decisions that aren't mine. This is not a threat. This is my final boundary. I reread it, then hit send. The first reply came from Mom. "Ariana, what are you doing? Why cut everything off so suddenly? I'm so hurt." I didn't reply. I needed silence to stay strong. Almost an hour later, my phone rang. "Madison." I let it ring 3 times before answering. "What do you think you're doing?" she nearly screamed. "You froze the card, stopped tuition payments. Are you trying to get my son kicked out of school?" Kept my tone even. "Your son has 2 parents. I'm not one of them." Her voice softened, now pleading. "I know you're mad. But could you at least talk to me? Instead of treating me like some enemy?" I pressed my lips together. "I've told you so many times, Madison. But you never listened. Because you never said anything clearly. You stayed quiet, then just walked away one day." "It wasn't sudden," I replied. "It was after years of you never looking back." There was a long pause on the line. I thought she might have hung up. "I didn't know it was this serious," she whispered. I exhaled slowly. "That's exactly the problem. You didn't know. Dad didn't know. Mom didn't know. Everyone just assumed I'd manage. That I'd keep going. No one asked if I needed a break." There was another stretch of silence. "I'll try to figure things out," she finally said. "But don't be so heartless, Ariana. We're still family." I hung up without another word. This wasn't about being heartless. It was about salvaging what little self-respect I had left. Because if I didn't draw a line now, I'd forever be the shadow in the background of a perfect family photo I was never invited into. It wasn't even afternoon yet, but the Houston sky looked like dusk. As I reheated my morning coffee, loud knocks thundered at my door, each bang heavy like someone channeling all their rage into their fist. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole. Madison stood there, hands clutching her purse straps, face flushed, eyes glassy. Beside her stood my father, arms crossed, his expression like stone. I wasn't surprised. I opened the door, standing just at the threshold, enough to face them but not invite them in. Madison lunged forward the moment she saw me, her voice cracked with frustration. "What are you doing, Ariana? Do you have any idea how much you're hurting me? The school called, the bank called, the store is falling apart." My father remained behind her, saying nothing at first, but his stare was sharp, the look of a man used to being obeyed. You can't behave like this, he said quietly but with a sharp edge. You're embarrassing your mother in front of the whole family. She's been crying all night. I didn't respond right away. I turned and walked inside, leaving the door open. They looked at each other, then followed. My apartment wasn't large. Neat, simple, without a single unnecessary item. They stood in the living room where there was just a single armchair and a wooden coffee table. I approached my desk, pulled a thick black file from the drawer I had prepared. I placed it on the table, my voice still calm. If you came here to cry, to blame, or to force me to do the right thing, then leave. But if you came to face the truth, here it is. Madison froze as I flipped open the file, revealing thick stacks of papers. Transfer statements, tuition receipts, insurance bills, documents for the vacation cabin mortgage, and contracts for the cosmetics brand sponsorship. I pulled out a handwritten contract from the middle and handed it to her. It was notarized and signed 3 years ago. Do you remember this? I asked. She looked at the paper and took a step back. I could clearly see hesitation in her eyes. My father stepped forward, glanced over it quickly, and frowned. What is this? This is the document Madison signed when she borrowed $50,000 from me to save the brand. The condition was if she didn't repay within 18 months, I would keep 59% ownership of the company. This, Madison stammered. I thought it was just a verbal agreement. You said you'd be flexible. I looked directly into her eyes. I sent a hard copy. You signed it. It was notarized. And since then, every month I've poured money into your company. $2,000 on the dot. Not a single month missed. I don't have to be flexible anymore. My father flipped through the file a few more times, then set it down. You never told your mother or me. We had no idea. Because I didn't think I had to report it, I said without looking away. No one asked me when they took the money. They only called when they needed an urgent transfer. No one asked, Ariana, can you? The atmosphere in the room grew thick as if all the oxygen had been sucked out. Madison suddenly broke down, crying uncontrollably. Are you trying to make me look bad in front of the whole family? How far do you want to humiliate me? I stood silently. No one's trying to make anyone look bad. I'm just bringing the truth to light. I've had hard times too, but it's not like you didn't take care of yourself. I work, I try. You can't keep threatening me with the past forever. I nodded. If you can support yourself, then from now on do it. I won't intervene, won't add another cent, and won't cover for your consequences. Your company, your responsibility. As for the shares I own, you can negotiate to buy them back if you want. But don't expect me to blindly sign again. My father squinted. You're using your shares as leverage? I smiled. Not leverage. Rights. Boundaries. And a refusal. For a long moment no one spoke. Madison still stood there, tears not yet dry. My father quietly scanned the room. Every shelf, every book, every detail showed I had lived a life neither excessive nor weak. You've changed, Ariana, he said slowly. I replied, voice steady, I haven't changed. I'm just done pretending. 2 days after Madison and my father left my apartment in tense silence, I received a courier envelope. The sender was a private law office in Austin. I opened it with a letter opener, my hand steady, but my heart clenched slightly at the bold headline, Demand for Return of Ownership, Madison Bloom Cosmetics Brand. The letter was 3 pages long, arguing that Madison signed the contract, while not legally competent, accusing me of exploiting family relations for personal gain, and demanding I return full ownership of the brand within 7 days or face a lawsuit for coercion and fraud. I read it through, then set it aside and dialed a number. Nicole, my only close friend, had once messaged me late one night. If you ever really need someone to stand by you, call Rachel Kane. She never backs down. I pressed call. A confident female voice answered. This is Rachel. Who's calling? Nicole Allen referred me. I'm Ariana Morgan. I just received a threatening lawsuit letter from my sister. We have a notarized business partnership contract signed 3 years ago. Send me all the documents. I need to see the contract structure, cash flow, transaction history, and all related correspondence. The more complete, the better. Less than 2 hours later, I sat in front of Rachel in a small 5th-floor office of a historic brick building downtown. She wore a white shirt and charcoal blazer, thin rim glasses, her voice even but every word sharp as a blade. Rachel flipped through the file page by page, eyes fixed on the text, her finger pressing on each section as if searching for a guiding thread. When she read the clause about transfer of ownership if repayments are not made, she looked up with a faint smile. You did everything by the book. And very smartly. I said nothing. She closed the file, hands clasped in front of her. If they want to fight, Rachel said slowly, we'll take them to court. And you can win. The issue isn't the contract itself. It's that they think you won't dare step out of the family shadow. I nodded. I've lived in that shadow for too long. Rachel began outlining a plan. Official response letter, a list of personal investments I'd made, collecting more evidence showing my role in managing the brand as a shareholder. She emphasized, you have to show them if they choose to fight you're not alone. That night as I poured myself a cup of hot tea, a text from Mom appeared. No concern, just one line, you're taking this too far. I stared at it for a long moment, then set my phone down without replying. The next day Rachel's response letter was sent. It outlined 3 points. First, the contract was legally signed, notarized, and without coercion. Second, I had invested continuously in the company with a total value over $80,000 without dividends. Third, any attempt to force share repayment constituted a breach of contract and violated my legal rights. 3 days passed with no reply. But on Thursday afternoon, the receptionist at Rachel's office announced a lawyer from Madison's side had arrived for a direct meeting. Rachel went out first, I followed. The man wore a dark blue suit, his face flushed with heat, holding a crumpled stack of papers. I'm here to negotiate, he said, unable to hide his frustration. Rachel pulled out a chair and invited him to sit. I said nothing, already opening the prepared file. The conversation was tense like a taut string. The representative tried to argue Madison was misled into signing, and that I didn't clearly explain the transfer of shares. Rachel slammed her finger on the notarized contract. Clause 4, line 2 clearly states that if your client didn't read before signing, that's not our fault. He fell silent for a moment, then lowered his voice. Madison's side may accept to negotiate a buyback at a reasonable price if my client agrees to stop publicizing the financial details. Rachel looked at me. Your decision. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady but clear. They don't need to worry about me going public. But I'm not selling what I had to fight for my freedom to keep. If Madison wants to negotiate, let her come forward herself. The man nodded without meeting my gaze as he stood and left. Rachel turned to me with a faint smile. You didn't flinch. Well done. I exhaled softly. Not because I felt victorious, but because finally I stood in my rightful place. No longer behind anyone. No longer a faint name in someone else's story. I was rewriting my own story. Page by page. I sat in the third-floor courtroom at Harris County beside Rachel, sunlight pouring through the tall window onto the polished wood table. The air was thick with silent tension. Across the table, Madison sat with crossed arms, chin raised, never once meeting my eyes. Her lawyer flipped through the file, trying to find even the smallest loophole. I heard the judge's gavel open the session, then the female judge's voice, clear but not cold. She was in her 50s, gray hair tied back, serious but fair. We will begin with the plaintiff's presentation. Rachel stood calmly and efficiently, placing documents on the table. The original notarized investment contract from 3 years ago, the monthly transfer statements I sent to Madison's company account, emails from Madison urgently requesting extensions, messages mentioning saving the company, I'll pay you back, I owe you this time, all with timestamps, tone, and context unmistakable. Your Honor, Rachel said firmly, my client not only invested following proper procedures but also has not received any profits from the defendant's company for 3 years. On the contrary, the defendant denies the entire signed agreement, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The opposing counsel tried to portray Madison as a businesswoman confused by legal complexities and bound by family ties. He used phrases that sounded moral. Family is where love is, there should be no hard boundaries. There might be misunderstandings due to lack of transparency. I listened but did not waver. During cross-examination, Madison stood. At first she was composed, but her voice grew louder with each answer. When Rachel asked, "Do you remember what you signed?" Madison answered, "I thought it was just temporary support." She's my sister. I didn't expect her to hold on this tightly. It's family. Who would do that? Rachel said nothing in reply. She just pushed the original contract forward to the judge, pointing at the bold print. All shares permanently transfer if the investment is not repaid on time. The signing date was when I was still working 2 jobs, using every extra dollar to save her company. The judge read every page carefully. When she looked up, her gaze pierced Madison. Perry, she said slowly, you signed this clause. You have 3 weeks to review and the right to refuse. You neither responded nor returned the money. Your client being your sister does not invalidate this legal agreement. Madison pressed her lips, eyes red. I wasn't sure if those were tears of anger or defeat. The judge lightly struck her gavel. The court rules the investment contract between plaintiff Ariana Morgan and defendant Madison Perry is legal and effective. 59% ownership of Madison Bloom Cosmetics belongs to the plaintiff. Court adjourned. Every word echoed in my chest. Not joy, not relief. Just a truth recognized that I had spent half a lifetime fighting for. Madison jumped up, the sound of her heels clicking sharply on the cold floor. She turned toward me, voice choking. You won. Are you happy now? My father stood behind her, gripping his briefcase tightly, saying nothing. My mother sat in the back row, hand on her chest, looking at me like I had just stabbed her heart. I stepped forward, standing before all 3, my voice low but each word clear in the now quiet room. I'm not here to win. I just don't want to be the loser forever without anyone knowing what I lost. My mother bit her lip, then whispered just one sentence. What do you want from this, Ariana? I looked her in the eye. I don't want to take anything from anyone. But I can't keep living without anything of my own. No one answered. I gathered the file and walked out of the courtroom. My footsteps echoed steadily along the old stone hallway. Behind me, no calls followed. Only my own breath, my own rhythm, and a silence that for the first time in years, no one walked beside me carrying my burden. 1 year after the Houston trial, I stood on the stage at the Finance Freedom Conference in Denver, looking down at the vast auditorium. Rows filled with hundreds of women of all ages, from young students to retired mothers. Each carried a story, a past, but I knew they shared one thing: having to choose between sacrifice, silence, or becoming an unconditional support for others. I did not prepare a flashy speech. I brought only the truth. And my heart no longer trembled as I spoke. My name is Ariana Morgan. I was always the one who said, "It's okay," whenever someone needed help. I thought silence was maturity. That love meant carrying more weight without complaint. But one day I sat down and tallied 10 years of expenses, and realized I had traded my whole life for the silence of those who never asked how I was. In the audience I saw wide eyes, focused faces. I continued, voice steady but never cold. I gave up scholarships, erased dreams to care for others. I paid for my sister's mistakes, nurtured dreams for children who don't carry my name. Each time I told myself, if I stay silent, everyone will be okay. But no one is okay. Because when people get used to receiving without gratitude, they see kindness as obligation. And when you have no boundaries, they step over you as if you never existed. I paused, scanning the room. An older woman in the second row nodded slowly, hands clasped. A young girl at the back wiped tears with the back of her hand. I didn't need them to cry. But I understood the feeling of invisibility deeply. I don't tell my story for applause. I tell it to remind everyone here. Your worth is not measured by how much you carry for others, but by what you know you're giving, and whether you can live peacefully afterward. After the talk, I sat at the meet and greet table. They came one by one. Some held my hand for a long time, silent but with gratitude in their eyes. Some showed me pictures of their children, told stories about removing an ex-husband from the business after years of silent suffering. There was a woman about my age, hair tied back, wearing an old coat, smiling with red eyes. I lent my entire savings too, she said, but no one paid me back and I never dared ask. Thank you for saying what I never could. I can't remember all their faces, but I carry every one of those stories back to Houston. My life now rings with fewer phone calls. Madison no longer calls. My mother left only a brief message on New Year's. If you have time, come home for dinner. I miss you. I don't reply. Not out of anger, but because I'm not ready to step back into a house where sighs drown out truth. I shifted most of my work to investment consulting for women entrepreneurs. I mentor a small group of startup women remotely. We meet over Zoom, share budgets, negotiation tactics, and most importantly, the right to say no when being used. They don't ask if I've been through it, but I know they understand. At night, I often sit by the window watching car lights pass along the quiet street. I brew tea in a small ceramic kettle I bought myself after last year's trial. The first gift I gave myself without worrying about anyone else's budget. No one calls me the obedient child anymore. But I don't need that title. I don't need praise for patience, nor do I need anyone to be grateful for the past. I need a present where I don't have to prove my worth through silent sacrifices. And I am living in that present. Not wealthy, not surrounded by family, but peaceful. A kind of freedom I took many years to dare to touch. And strangely, when I stopped trying to be the best in others' eyes, I truly became myself. Seen or not, I am still myself. Recognized or not, I still have value. Called by name or not, I still exist. Whole, quiet, but no longer backing down. Have you ever silently sacrificed for your family to the point of losing yourself? Have you ever been in a situation where love becomes a burden, and all the responsibilities fall on your shoulders just because you never said no? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your story because maybe your words will inspire someone out there who is learning to stand up for themselves. If my story makes you think, makes you reflect on your role in your family, please hit like to spread this message further. And don't forget to subscribe to continue walking with me through honest, heartfelt, and sometimes painful stories about relationships that seem strong but are surprisingly fragile. Because there are things in family life no one teaches us how to face. And only after going through them do we truly understand the value of living for ourselves.